Ladies, we're diving into a critical topic that affects so many women, the gender wealth gap. So, women work two-thirds of the world's working hours, but only earn 10% of the world's income. On average, women earn 20% less than men, and women graduates earn less than their male counterparts, even in their first year in the workforce. In South Africa, 41.7% of households are headed by women, many of whom are breadwinners. This is the reality of the female economy. Lesego, when you hear these stats, how has this data really shown up in your life or in the life of women around you?
I mean, it hits home because I remember one time I went for an interview, and the normal interview questions were asked, and right towards the end, one of the male interviewers asked me if I had kids, and at the time I didn't have kids. But then when I reflected on it, I was like, oh, so if I don't have kids, it means obviously I can be stretched and I can work longer hours. But does that mean that another woman who did have more responsibility would be at a disadvantage to get the role? Because I was like, okay, what was the relevance of that particular question? And sometimes you find even still today, their workplace policies that are not really, sitting well for women to progress. For example, maternity leave policies. For example, if you have not worked at an organization for a certain amount of time, when you get pregnant, you don't get paid maternity leave. And I was in that situation. So I had to choose whether I would just stay home with my baby for 6 weeks or for 4 months. So then I had to prioritize taking care of my baby for the first 4 months. And I did not have a salary at the time. Yes, I did get UIF, but it's not enough because it's not like my bills decreased, So it's those types of examples that I've seen personally play out in spaces where I feel women are disadvantaged, and it leads to exactly the stats that you're talking about.
It's so interesting when you think about the fact that women get pregnant and they have maternity leave, but when we look at the data, they are working more hours.
Exactly.
It's such a conundrum when you think about really the realities of what women are confronting when it comes to the workplace and their ability to create wealth. Melvin, when you hear this data, how much do you believe societal norms and expectations impact women's financial opportunities?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. And I think from a behavioral economics perspective, we try to understand how cultural, emotional, psychological, and societal factors influence our economic decision-making, essentially our financial behavior. And the example you gave is absolutely fantastic. So child giving in itself, number one, is one of the leading deterrents of, workplace inequalities, for example, because you have to take time off. And then unfortunately, there's certain unconscious biases that exist in the workplace that lead to questions like that, right? Another very interesting concept is that in South Africa, there are more female graduates than men, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting. So it's not an issue of they're not capable, a skill set issue. No, women are 100% capable. They are educated. They are graduating. We're seeing the numbers. But somehow when we enter the workplace, there are certain unconscious, unseen biases that really come to play as well. Another societal issue is obviously how we grow up. If we take it back to the household, how we exist, right? We talk about who deals with the finances. A lot of time, I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, it's not really, something that I deal with. Finances is not something I take care of myself. I leave that to someone else. So how we brought up, we taught that women are supposed to maybe not be in charge of the finances or have sight of the finances. And so we take that learning and that process as we go along. And that is essentially, I guess, status quo bias, right? To say, well, if I grew up in a household where I see women not really being in charge of the finances of the household, I'll maintain that and maybe even maintain the knowledge gap that we have in terms of understanding financial literacy and its impact. So I think there are so many dynamics that deal from a cultural perspective, from a social perspective, that really influence these stats that we have.
It's very interesting that you bring up, the way that we were raised and how you are sort of, you have this expectation that you're going to get a partner who's going to take care of things, particularly with women. But then you look at the data and it says there's so many households that are led by female breadwinners today, whether that is because they are the sole providers in the household, or maybe they are the ones who have the higher income in the household. When you look at all this data, it has a dichotomy in it, right? Some of it is like, this is what this data should look like when we look at the bank and where people are investing and what products they're coming up with, how we're addressing people at the bank. And then you look at the parts where maybe some of the households have, 2 parents and what that starts to look like. When you look at the bank, Charmaine, and where you're seeing money moving and who it's coming from, what does it look like contextualized against this data?
Sure, Nomdeni, you said something very pertinent. Particularly when it comes to women, because as women, we're very risk averse. And we find that we think once, twice, and thrice before we make a decision. And we tend to not to want to invest into, investments that are usually,
high
not
risk.
out there, high risk, or, the hardcore type of investments.
Yes.
But we find that women would want to go for investments that they are accustomed to, where there's more guarantee. And when we compare ourselves to our male counterparts, we find that males don't mind taking the risk. And we know that high returns is where, the risk is, and vice versa. So we therefore need to, take a step back as women and really start, putting ourselves out there in our abilities to save and invest, and really educate ourselves around what is available out there, particularly, that for us as women, and that could benefit us in the long run. So it's more of socialization again. And I would like to go back in saying how we've been brought up plays a huge role 100%. In our decision-making processes, and particularly as we are adults, as women, because what we've seen and observed from an early age, we tend to use some of those principles in our adulthood. And because we're nurturers, as naturally, we tend to take care of others as opposed to, splurging on finances and really putting money into diversified type of investments. We would rather take care of family members as opposed to investing it. So we need to really start rethinking about strategies in which we can start growing our investments and accelerating our investment strategies so that we can ultimately try and, match the male counterparts investment appetites.
It's interesting as we get into this conversation. I'm seeing 2 avatars emerge in terms of the woman that we're talking to. We have the lady that has a partner who is maybe more in charge of the finances of the home. Maybe they have sight of what's happening. Maybe they don't have sight of what's happening. Then we have the lady who is a single parent, right? Who is still generating revenue, but maybe is not in a place where they feel confident around where they place this revenue. So I want to speak to the lady that is in charge of her finances and who is looking at opportunities around what they do to create wealth for themselves. The confidence barrier, which is really an internal barrier when it comes to our ability to go into those more high-risk investments and high-risk opportunities. Where does that come from? I want to better understand, as a behavioral expert, what informs that lack of confidence when it comes to taking those risks when we think about growing our money?
Yeah, I think it really is tied along with societal impact that we mentioned earlier. I think behaviorally speaking, there are certain aspects. I don't want to gender biases, so I'm not going to go into that. But as women, I think what really is a barrier to us sometimes is the fact that we might feel we maybe not as confident in our knowledge of like how to handle my finances, right? And a lot of times we kind of know what we need to do whenever someone is talking about, okay, you need to have a budget, you need to do X, Y, Z. I know exactly what I need to do. but somehow there are some things that are affecting me and not being able to impact that. So I just want to quickly unpack some of the factors that might lead to social anxiety. Not social anxiety, but financial anxiety. Ooh, number one, being a, like you said, single mom, right? Childbearing in itself. Where are my next finances going to come from? How am I going to pay my bills? So that really feeds into that. The second piece that I'd like to highlight is the fact that as women, like you mentioned, we tend to be a lot more loss averse. That means that we tend to, as human beings, we tend to value, feel the pain of losses twice as much as we feel the pain of gains.
Yes.
So we feel like, oh, I might lose out on what I already have. What if, the grass is not greener on the other side, perhaps? So that is something that also impacts people. And I think from a creating commitment devices, something as simple as you writing down and having a routine, not having a plan. Sometimes we overestimate whether or not we're able, I want to save 100,000 Rand, but if you don't have a plan, manageable goals and steps to get towards it, that can really deter you from taking the actions that you need to take as well. So I think from a behavior perspective, there are many things that might influence your actual actions. But also socially speaking, we are social beings. And so we are influenced by what people do around us, maybe how other people might perceive you, number one. What was very interesting is that there was a very interesting study that was done in the UK where they were looking at lotto winners. I know, guys, we think lottery winners are like 10 million, etc. No. There's some people who win 100,000, 500,000. And they had a look to say, well, usually when people win lottery, they want to change maybe renovate, make their houses look good. So because we're a social creature and we take comfort knowing what other people, in comfort knowing that people are similar to us, are doing similar things. And so they're like, okay, let's look at these lottery winners and let's see, after they renovate their houses, what will the impact be on their neighborhood, right? People similar to them. And they found that as soon as, the renovations happened, in the lottery winners' houses, the rest of the community also started making renovations as well.
Really?
So it's so interesting, right? Number one, we know that the lottery winners got quote unquote free money.
Yes.
But we don't know where the others got their money from, right?
Yeah.
So we really are social creatures. So social impact and the fact what other people might think of us might influence, a bit of anxiety. Do I know enough? Do I not know enough? And a lot of times we tend to underestimate the knowledge that we have. I'm sure you've all heard this concept of there's someone who's less talented than you that is doing the dream that you want to do, right? It's an interesting concept called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where people who are not as skilled really overestimate themselves. But sometimes we need to adopt some of this stuff in how we perceive ourselves, take charge and not hide away from the finances or the financial conversations that we need to have, and understand who is influencing us. What are the hidden shadows that influence our behavior on a daily basis? And once we are aware of that, we're able to start taking the practical necessary steps to get there.
I love that. I love that idea of being aware of the shadows that are influencing our financial decisions.
100%.
Lesego, for you, as you've transitioned from one stage of your life to the other, how have you seen your financial risk appetite grow or decline? When you're a young woman and you're just like, okay, all this money is mine, I wish. All this money is mine. I don't have people I'm responsible for, whether it's children or family. You tend to either you're going to waste it, or if you're lucky and you have information, you start to kind of pile up and save a lot. But I think there is something that happens as we grow older as women. Our nurturing nature positions us in the space where we feel the need to really start to either help family members and help people around us, or really focus on making sure that there's money left over for our families if we have young ones. How have you seen your transition from different stages in your life affect your financial risk appetite? Because I think that's the thing. We want to make money, but we don't want to bet on that. We don't want to scam. Like, okay, wait. But in actual fact, that does, as we are learning today, it does hold us back. How have you seen that happen in your own life?
when I did the Nedbank money type personality test, it said that I'm a penny pincher.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think,
But is it true?
I would say I'm a penny pincher, but with a weakness for nice things.
I understand.
That's the only risk to it. So I think in terms of transitioning, obviously when you're young, you have less responsibility, and sometimes it does feel like, oh, but back then I had more money because, when I started working, I could take myself to massages every month and all of that, and I could save more. And as you progress, then there's also family responsibilities. And I think I'm also that kind of person that, loves to make people around me comfortable. If a sibling is in financial distress, I like to help out and so on. But I think sometimes I've been in a situation where I've overstretched myself. And as I'm growing, I'm learning to say, look, this is my boundary. How can I help you if I'm not helping myself? So I have become conservative in that area. And I think also when you become a mother, obviously then you start becoming very serious about the future, because it's not just about you, it's about these children. So you learn more, you want to invest more because there's education for your kids and all of that. But in contrast to that, then there's also mom guilt, right? Because you want to compensate. If I'm traveling for work and I'm out of the house for like 5 days, I want to buy them things so that I feel better about leaving them behind. So then I end up making impulse decisions. So I've had to become more conscious, intentional, and really track my money and learn my habits so that, I can have the type of future that I envision for myself.
Lovely.
I really love that. I feel like
Yeah.
you're the ideal. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like when you hear penny pincher, you think that's what we should all be doing. We should not be spending.
Yeah.
I feel like when people do that money personality test, when they take it and they see penny pincher, they maybe feel like, yes, it's a good thing.
This is what I want.
But Sinead, can we talk a little bit about the pros and cons of a penny pincher when it comes to the money personalities? Because the minute I hear it, I'm just like, oh, I wish I was a penny pincher, right?
I was like, oh, good for you.
But let's talk a little bit about it. What are the pros and cons of a personality type like Lisigo's?
Well, it's not such a bad thing being a penny pincher. I mean, we all want to be one, right? But I always say when you're dealing with finances, you need to create a healthy balance.
Yes.
Because essentially, if you're a penny pincher, you tend to hoard money as much as you can. You saving it so much that in your mind, you're thinking, what if something happens tomorrow? You're constantly on edge, living on edge, thinking, I need to save as much as I can just in case something bad happens, just in case I need it for tomorrow, and you forget to live for today. So it's important that as a penny pincher, you create a healthy balance. Make sure that you make provision for the important things in life, but not also neglect yourself, and have fun a little bit, And I appreciated when you said you like the nice things of life. Do that, and don't feel guilty about it, because as a penny pincher, once you start spending on yourself or your family members, you tend to feel guilty. And that's not how we should, live life or manage our personal finances. We should ensure that we make provision for the things that are important, that will ensure that our livelihood is taken care of, but as well as ensuring that, we live for the moment, but create that healthy balance as well. Yes, the money archetypes, at times we tend to look at the blind spots quite a lot and focus on the blind spots. But I'd like to say that there's also, the good characteristics that come with every money archetype. So it's important to know what it is that comes with your money archetype so that you can be aware of those money blind spots and leverage on the good traits that come with that money archetype.
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Yay. Okay.
Do you know what your money archetype is?
I am a carer and a big shot at the same time. I like things.
Oh, is there ever a time when you could be a bit of both?
Absolutely.
So tell us about yours.
Absolutely. So my one is a carer, and you're great. Guys, I struggle with saying no.
Oh.
I struggle because I become so overwhelmed with, the emotion of guilt, of thinking maybe this individual really wanted, what they were asking from me. And people use you as their, survival plan. Absolutely. You know, because they know that I can constantly go to this person and she'll never say no. And I experienced it so many times in my life, and I will constantly make commitments to myself and saying, you know what, next month I am going to say no. And I had this family member, we get paid on the 20th, right? And trust and believe, from the 1st of the month until the 19th of the month, she wouldn't breathe my direction. She wouldn't call me. Maybe she didn't even think of me. But the first call that I would receive on the 20th was from her. So I would constantly tell myself, you know, I know how this call is going to end up. And I would constantly say, I'm going to refuse. I'm not going to give her what she wants. Guess what happens?
You say yes.
I'd say yes. And because I was afraid of that emotion, that guilt emotion that constantly would overwhelm me. So it's important that as a carer, you start, you know, creating those healthy boundaries, understanding that no is still an answer, particularly if you don't have the means to help. And you said that, you know, you cannot help your family members if you can't help yourself. It's exactly that. You cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
So it's important that we really need to look out for ourselves, particularly the carers, but help to a certain extent, not to an extent that will be detrimental to our personal finances.
Melvin, are there any insights in behavioral economics that can help anyone who's watching, who's a carer, which I feel is a lot of women, right? The money that you're planting in people is money you could be investing for your future. I shared it in the last episode that one of the things that I have taken on to help me navigate some of these challenges that come with caring for other people or showing up for other people is to really commit to having this long-term plan around, if I can get myself to a better financial position, then I can help everyone.
Yeah.
But between today and that time, I just need to toughen up and be able to say no. But that's not everyone's personality. You know, Charmaine speaks about over-flooding emotions of guilt. If someone is looking at this or watching this conversation and they resonate with what Charmaine is talking about, what insights could you share around what is actually happening when those things, those emotions come up for us, and what tools can we start to access that help us really navigate that transition from overwhelm when those emotions come up and managing those emotions when they come up?
Now, that's such a great question. And I love the quote that you just gave. You know how we say you cannot pour from an empty cup?
Yeah.
And it really speaks to, if you're in a space of like scarcity, you aren't able to pour into other people's cups. And I'm not talking about scarcity from a time perspective. I'm talking about like a self-care resource perspective. If you're not taking care of yourself, after you send that money and you feel like, oh no, now I have to sacrifice a piece of something, you are now scarce on something else, right? You are losing a lot more than you can give. So I think another thing is that it's not just about saying no. Sometimes you don't want to lose that relationship, right?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot more you trying to hold on to. Oh, I want this person to still need me. Obviously, we can go a bit deeper in that to say maybe from a validation perspective, feeling needed, I can definitely resonate with that. Sometimes it feels good to be needed, right? But then sometimes it gets to a point where it's detrimental to you. So once again, from a scarcity perspective, you are removing you're removing all the resources that you need for yourself and pouring it into other people. And scarcity is distracting. And what that means is that if you want to make better like life choices, etc., if you are scarce on time, if you are scarce on maybe that person is chugging at the fact that you're scarce on relationships.
Yes.
They know that you don't really have that many friends. And perhaps, you know, you feel special when they post you on their status.
So true.
You know, they
very
right?
true.
So understanding the source of you giving and pouring.
Me. I just realized like that's what's happening in one of my friendships. And I mean, I'm not really like a crazy carer, but that was such a light bulb moment for me, because there is a relationship where I realized that I am getting time from them, but I am spending money in return for the time.
100%. And sometimes these conversations are very tough to unpack, especially because you're like, me, no, I'm a very confident person. I don't need anyone's validation. But how come you feel like you only deserve recognition at work when you do well? Why do you feel like you deserve a gift when you do something good, right? So those small patterns that we do to say, oh, if I work, if I maybe submit a presentation 5 weeks early, I'll get a thumbs up and that makes me feel good. In a work context, yes. But then it trickles in because that's essentially a routine and a behavior that you're constantly doing. And it's a pattern. And it manifests in different aspects of your life through and through to how you send someone money. They're going to call you and, with those boundaries. So perhaps then having some commitment devices you can put to yourself is having chunks or labeling a certain amount of money you can give people. My sister has a very interesting concept. I hope she's okay with me sharing. But she has a certain limitation or threshold that, like a helping threshold that she has. To say, well, if I put aside X amount this month, I'm then able to have control, increase the locus of control in terms of what I'm able to give out. And that is an informed decision. So if I'm getting 5,000 Rand every month and I dedicate that 500 Rand to people that might ask, and it's okay to say, well, this month I only have X amount. Will that help, right? Because most people will then end up saying, okay, yeah, sure, thank you so much, blah, blah, blah. So it's just to maybe put the limitations to yourself and your habits and the pot that you have. To categorize and say, this is how much I'm able to give out. So that pot that speaks to investing, good financial behavior, taking care of yourself, that pot is not taken out of.
Absolutely.
And that's how our human brains really think. So it's called mental accounting. We compartmentalize the money that we get, right? In your mind, you can just think, okay, that's holiday money, that's food money. We naturally, from a human behavior perspective, compartmentalize. If that's how our brain acts or behaves, why can't we assimilate that and make sure that our environment works alongside with how our brain operates? To say, this is my giving pot, this is my saving pot, this is my fun pot, this is my... I can risk a little bit of this, a pot, right, to allow for different types of behavior.
I like that that analogy that you just brought in now, because it speaks to what I wanted to get to as we help the woman listening think through what are the immediate actions that they can take in order to start to change their wealth portfolio. That's what I'm going to call it. Their wealth portfolio. Charmaine, when you think about the concept of, these pots that we have, in essence, they are helping us track our expenses.
100%.
They're helping us figure out where am I spending my money and where am I overspending. I already know which pot is a problem in my life. But when you think about the concept of tracking our expenses, you just gave us a really nice concept where you can have your helping pot, so it's 200 Rand. I feel like it would be first come, first serve in that pot in my life. Whoever came first is the one who gets it. But Charmaine, what other expenses are we not considering when we think about tracking our expenses? Because I think when we have those expenses that we're not considering, that's where we get tripped up, right? Because immediately I'm going to take from my savings if there's something that I didn't consider, which starts to become a high priority. When you have conversations with women who are coming and talking to you about their financial wellness, what are you seeing as something that we are constantly not thinking about when it comes to tracking our expenses?
No, Danny. Women are emotional beings.
Yes.
We are driven by emotions. Lisako just mentioned that, she's a parent. As soon as her son comes and asks for, something that would potentially require finances, she would immediately, want to cater to that need. So we firstly need to assess, ourselves in terms of how we're feeling. And before we make any financial decisions, don't attach your finances with your emotions, because you'll get sidetracked. So that is the one contributing factor that stands in the way of women achieving their financial goals and ultimately wealth creation. And secondly, we may, write things down. However, when we go out, some of those things that we've written down just go out the window as well. So entertainment is the second biggest one. entertainment.
And being realistic, right?
Being realistic about it and saying,
realistic.
we know when you write things down, you are so prudent. You're saying, you know what, this month I'm going to go out twice. No, not more than that. And then I come and I say, Nomdeni, let's go out. Where does that money come from?
I need to block
you
those
understand?
friends.
Please block them because they're not good for
my
us.
downfall.
They're not good for us. So we need to really look at the nitty-gritties of our lives. And when we're going to take stock of our finances, we need to be honest with ourselves. And we cannot deal with finances if you're not going to be disciplined. So you need to really set goals and hold yourself accountable in whatever promises you're making on that template that you would be writing down. So the number one is that emotional spending. Second one is entertainment. Those are the major, expenses that we tend to overlook as women.
Lesego, you started this conversation about tracking expenses. You're the one who initially brought it up. When you started looking at your own experience of tracking expenses, I'm curious to find out, where did you find that your pitfalls were? I'm curious. I don't want to draw a conclusion because I'm just like, I don't know what like money pinchers would do that would like sidetrack them, because I'm definitely not. But when you started tracking your expenses at different stages of your life, what did you find were some of the pitfalls for you?
I think it's things like I love events. That's why I'm part of the tribe. So if there's a nice, pretty event that's coming up, I'm like,
Yeah,
I can't resist this. Where I've also noticed, like, I don't normally carry lunch to work. So all those Uber Eats and all of that, they accumulate. And if you think about also when you go out, just that one occasion in a month, how much is it? 600 Rand, 1,000 Rand? Because you're there for hours. So those are the little things that I have picked up as I've started tracking my expenses. And of course, with the kids, buying them Happy Meals because of the, like
Just
all
make them
those
happy.
things.
Yes,
all those
things to make you happy.
Oh, and I must say another thing. While I was doing an exercise of my subscriptions.
yeah, yeah.
Good one.
There are a lot.
Yeah, and I realized that I have so many subscriptions. It's YouTube, it's Canva, it's this
Netflix.
app,
Yeah.
it's Netflix, and I had to really cut down on my subscriptions to what I really, really need. So yeah, that was a big one as well. Yeah.
Melvin, it looks like a lot of the challenges that we face when it comes to our finances is very mindset driven. Everything that is happening right now around the light bulb moments are just things that we kind of get into and we get moving, and we don't really take the time to stop and think through those, those patterns and those behaviors. What can we do, like low hanging fruits? The immediate thing that I could do to really overcome those setbacks that come from not having the mindset that is, I guess, you develop over time. I don't want to put anyone under pressure. I really think shifting the way that you perceive your relationship with money
100%.
is like going to therapy.
100%.
It's something that you need to constantly be looking at. It's the reason you need to have money dates and you stop and you account and you write things down. What are the immediate low-hanging fruits that you can share with us around starting to shift our financial mindsets and overcome some of the setbacks that are really common with everyone?
Yeah. So that Uber Eats conversation, guys. So there's a reason Uber Eats doesn't have a lifetime summary of how much you've spent, right?
Oh.
Because if that information was readily and easily available,
your
decision, exactly, right? I sat down once, did my 2022 calculations on an Excel spreadsheet, but there's a reason that information is not readily available. They don't send you that, right? Because from a human behavior perspective, we pay attention to information that is readily and easily available.
True.
So when you go out on that spending spree and you're not supposed to be, it's almost like you put your head in the sand like an ostrich.
I feel
Before
like
the
I just
ostrich
came
effect.
out of one just now.
Yeah, and you're not even opening your banking app at all. No, what is this banking app? I don't need to open it. I'm just gonna keep
Avoiding it.
buying it.
Apple Pay should be an entire episode.
Exactly. We should have an episode for Apple Pay. So there's so many biases and factors that really influence our decision making. So the first thing that I would suggest is, number one, because we pay attention to information that is easily available, that we can easily see because that's called availability bias. So I would recommend putting your expenses out in the open, right? That Uber Eats that you talk, that exercise that you did.
Go quiet.
So uncomfortable right now.
What do you mean?
Like,
Yes, it's time to get really personal with your spending. To say, let me open it. Let me see where all this information, where all my money is going to. Let me be honest about it.
Yeah.
Even if it means taking the Uber Eats app, opening an Excel spreadsheet like I did, and going back to the year you want to calculate. Just get 1 year, right? Going back and inserting every single amount. It will be an exercise that is 30 minutes max. It will change your life. You will realize that maybe I could have saved. I could have opened maybe an account and got an interest on it. Perhaps I actually have more income at the end of the month than I think I do.
That's a big one,
right?
That's a big one.
Sure.
Actually realizing how much money you have, but you've been spending it impulsively because you're not actually taking time to look at where your money is going.
Where your money is going. So that's one. Another thing that works for me, I'll also give personal examples because, guys, I suffer as well as a human being.
Yeah.
When it comes to having money goals, there's so many challenges we see on social media.
Yeah.
But one thing I like to do is to actually print out how much you have a certain amount you want to save. Let's just say by the end of the year, I want to save 10,000 Rand. By July, where's that goal? Is it in a notepad in your phone, in a piece of paper in your desk, right? So we don't really visually see all of this. That's why we have things like vision boards, right?
Yeah.
It has to be something that is right in front of you. And every time you achieve it, you put a tick on it, right? It's important for you to put ticks every time you achieve a financial goal.
Yeah.
Because it's called goal gradient theory. From a human behavior perspective, the closer we get to a goal, we see ourselves progressing and getting to a goal, the more motivated we are to get there, right?
Yeah.
That's why shops have loyalty cards, by the way.
Yeah.
That 10th coffee, you've paid for it because you've bought coffee 10 times, right?
I feel like you're just here to drag me today because there's a coffee situation as well. But
That's
anyway,
happening. Yeah.
you can continue.
As I continue. So you're able to track. So make sure if you want to save a certain amount of money, make sure you either get something printed out or physically just write it out. And every time you put that money or transfer that money into an account, put a tick on it. You'll be giving yourself visual cues. It's a mini celebration as well. Another thing I would also implement is to give yourself mini celebrations along the way. So when it comes to like behavior change, especially, from my everyday work perspective, how to create sustainable behavior change, sometimes waiting for 12 months, guys, it's a long time, right? You want to be able to celebrate the small wins along the way to encourage you to keep going, right? To say, well, now I want to unlock a different level. That's why you have companies that have programs that...
That gamifying.
Gamifying, right? Making it exciting for yourself. And it's so interesting. We do it for my nieces as well. And you can do it for yourself, right? Another thing is that when you create goals, I've done every single goal creation thing in the world, right? And so from a yearly goal perspective, I came across this interesting concept of like the 12-week year, right? So essentially you break your year up into 4 segments and you create manageable goals that you can track and keep yourself accountable every 12 weeks. You don't have to wait for a full year cycle for you to look back and say, did I save 10,000 Rand?
Yeah.
No, every 3 or 4 months, you're having honest conversations with yourself to say, but did I get to where I want to go? Then are these goals that I set for myself realistic? Because I set up a plan to save 1,000 Rand every month, but looking at my spending and my behavior, I was only able to save 500 Rand. Perhaps I now need to either change my goal, and it's okay. Because the thing is, it's okay to change your goal, but try not to lose it completely. Because progress is still progress at the end of the day when it comes to finances. So I'll do that. I would also do commitment devices. So either you can do it through apps. There are very interesting apps out there where, you can use commitment devices. And also, if you want to socially do that, to have a buddy in your social circle.
That's a great idea.
And just say, actually, how much are you going to save, buddy? Because we all have gym buddies, right? If you go to these complexes, there's always like a notice, who wants to jog with me? I'm looking for a gym buddy. Maybe
yeah.
you should find like an investment buddy to say, what are the goals that I'm putting or committing to? And you have someone to keep you accountable. Because like I said, we are social beings, right? That social influence is quite important. And then the third piece, well, I don't know what number I'm on, but I think the most important part with all of this is understanding who to listen to. We are social beings, so the people around us are important. But then sometimes you have to also be wary of, what advice you're listening to. Because there is advice out there that says, no, interest-bearing accounts are terrible or growth is terrible. And those are coming from people that we value.
We trust.
And we trust, right?
True.
We're having a conversation yesterday with one of the learners at work, and she was saying, no, she did her degree. I'm like, fantastic. Are you going to do your master's? And she's like, I heard that it's really hard. They only select a few people. And I'm like, so were the people with the master's degrees telling you that, or the people
that didn't make it?
So who are you? Who are the voices that are influencing your behavior?
Yeah.
So we just need to make sure that that's why like forums like this are so important, because it's people like you doing similar things with similar goals as well, to make sure that you curate those voices.
I really love that, because speaking of this forum, the idea of also when we started thinking through the money dates, it was important to have someone's lived experience, which,
100%.
it would be someone who is part of that gender woman tribe. But more than that, it was crucial for me to have someone who is a financial expert and someone who's a behavioral expert, because sometimes we have the knowledge, we have all the data, we've heard the conversations, we've heard people saying, this is a unit trust, this is a this is a that, but we struggle to figure out why we're actually not doing what it is that we need to do. Now that Melvin has shown us everything that we need to think about as we navigate changing our mindsets, Charmaine, I want you to help us with tools and practical advice around. Now I have my buddy, right? I have my investment buddy, and we are studying at the beginning. I mean, even the idea of opening my app is overwhelming, and putting that spreadsheet and figuring out. I mean, I do those things sometimes, and it literally takes me so much time because I'm also not great with numbers. But what practical advice would you give, people who are thinking, okay, I already know who my buddy is going to be. I know when we're going to have the meeting. What is the first thing that we need to do when we get into the meeting? Practical advice, something we can go away from this conversation and actually do.
And implement. The hardest part is starting. That's the hardest part. I would honestly and truthfully say, and you've said it, so beautifully, Mel, but it's important that as an individual, you understand your why. You understand why you want to do this, because the next steps, will reveal themselves. You'll understand the how you're going to do that. It'll come from that why. You'll understand the what, and you'll understand the who. And we already know who the who is. That will be our accountability partner. So you first need to understand what your goal is as an individual, and write things down. There is power in things that are written down. When you start seeing them, you're giving them life. As you've said, you are visualizing your future, but it becomes a constant reminder, and you are holding yourself accountable. Secondly, make sure that you take stock of your finances. It does not happen out of osmosis. It does not happen automatically. You will need to be intentional and commit to that goal. If you're saying you're not going to go out twice, you're going to go out once, commit to that. If you're saying you're not going to buy that shoe that's on sale, you need to commit to that. So commitment plays a very big role. Thirdly, you need to ensure that you accelerate paying your debt. In these tough economical times, servicing and maintaining debt is very expensive, and it takes a chunk of our income. So when you think about, some of the investment tools or even the vehicles that you will need to open, don't think too big. Start small. And I would have, I'm one individual that is obsessed with 5 Rand coins. And if there's one person that's sitting at home and watching this and possibly thinking to themselves, I don't have that much money to start investing. We need to demystify that notion that for you to start saving, you need to have
a lot of money.
No, I started with a 5 Rand coin, literally filling it up into a jar. That 5 Rand coin equated to 250. You initially really need 250 to start investing. And you open your tax-free investment or savings account.
I'm an advocate for a TFSA.
You understand?
Absolutely.
Yes. You open that. And once you start seeing that money in that bank account, guess what that does? You become motivated. You see it grow and you want to do more. What that does behaviorally, you will start thinking twice before you spend that for that coffee, before you buy that cup of coffee. So it's important that you really understand what your vision is, what your goal is, so that all the other steps that you take going forward, supports your goal and your vision.
I absolutely love that idea of starting with why, because it also could potentially be very helpful in picking who your buddy is.
Absolutely.
If you see an alignment in the reason that you are both going to be going down this journey, it's easier for each one of you to support each other. Niseko, coming back to tracking expenses again, because I really love a good tip and tool that I can take away and really start to use. In your own life, what have you seen really work when it comes to you committing to actually going back? Because tracking your expenses, you can't track your expense once. You have to do it continuously. There is some kind of habit that you need to form in going back. And I know that you probably have fallen off a couple of times, but what have you seen been really effective in terms of a system that you've created for yourself in tracking where your money is going?
I think for me, downloading the 22 app, because I like it because you are able to set your budget, and on a monthly basis, you can see whether you overspend or underspend on a particular budget line. And then also you are able to track those little things. Like that's how I was able to see that, oh my God, I'm spending this much on subscription, because it categorizes everything and you're able to see the total at the end of the day. And it updates, it's linked to my bank account, and it updates on a daily basis. And also, the good old-fashioned Excel spreadsheet. I have that. I managed to download one from the internet, and it's formulated. So I input my income, and then my expenses, and then it tracks my projected expenses versus what I've actually spent. And that actually helps me a lot. That has been very effective.
I really love that. That is really, really great. I mean, I still am on the good old-fashioned Excel sheet, but I mean, I also drop off, right? Sometimes I come back to it and I'm like, I haven't really inputted anything in like 2 months. And that's when I get the big headache when I have to sit and track back to, the last 8 weeks or the last 2 months. And I do have this thing, and I don't know what it's called, but maybe when I get back to you, Melvin, you'll tell us. I've realized for myself that I have this moments where I splurge. It's like I can have a week of extreme splurging, and then I come back and I'm like, what the hell just happened to me? Is it my cycle? I know I'm coming out of one now because it was my birthday, so I had so many things that I was just like buying. I literally sent a message to my friend and I was like, I can't use my birthday as an excuse anymore for all this shopping. So I want to know for you, Charmaine, when it comes to reviewing your finances and staying on that cycle personally, because I know that these are issues that we all face no matter. I remember one of the calls with the Nedbank team and someone saying, I work for a bank and I still suffer. There's still things that I just don't do well. How have you seen adapting, the habit of reviewing really be impactful in your own growth? And I hope this is encouraging for people who fall off, because it's a reality. I don't think I've had a year where I've been consistent in looking at my finances every single month. How have you seen the habit of reviewing really help you in figuring out what kind of behaviors lead to you falling off, and where in the year it happens, where in the month it happens, and how has that really helped you shape, some shifts and changes that you've made in your own journey?
No, then you're becoming personal now.
I love being personal.
Well, we tend to make, and I like what you said, it was your birthday and happy belated, by the way.
Thank you.
We tend to overstep, our own financial boundaries and we make it okay. It becomes acceptable. And we need to start really putting the hard rules, particularly for ourselves. And when we talk about, monitoring and tracking your personal finances, it's not a once-off exercise where you just, drop a budget just to feel good about yourself and then you move on and you say it's there. But it's something that you need to constantly follow through on. You need to constantly go back and see, am I still on track? Do I need to possibly, cut back on certain aspects of, my spending patterns? And I always say that you cannot change something that you cannot see. So it's important to always ensure that you become as consistent as you can be and commit to yourself. Write those expenses down and stick to them. Do not over and underestimate them because you're doing yourself a disservice, a huge one. Behaviorally, one person would potentially, underestimate their expenses just to kind of think that they actually have surplus funds, but it does them a disservice in the long run. So essentially, it's all about you being true to yourself, taking control of your finances, rewrite your own money story because it starts there. You will not achieve anything if you don't make hard choices, particularly when it comes to money. So that's where you need to start in saying, let me write down everything that I need to follow through on a monthly basis and make sure that I commit to that. So even if it's a book, we're talking digital at this stage, but we still have people that will still want to write things down. If that strategy works for you, do that. If an Excel document, do that. But if you're living now in the digital age and you feel that you can use the digital platforms that are readily available to you, do that. Find a strategy that works for you and run with it. Nothing really beats, you being honest with yourself, particularly when it comes to your personal finances, because ultimately you will achieve the greater goal that you've set for yourself.
I think one of the things that I'm hearing and which is resonating with me and I'm hearing over and over again in this conversation is write things down. And Melvin, I just want you to maybe share a little bit about, the power of writing things down and not just the things that you need to do, but really investing in investigating your emotions behind money. Right? Because when you mentioned earlier the idea of the shadows that lurk behind us, the things that we don't pay attention to, but that move forward when it comes to how we spend money and how we engage with money, I can't imagine a better way of unpacking that than actually journaling and writing things down and looking at your week or your day and thinking about, when you had that day where you didn't maybe cook and you said you were going to cook, what was happening? And I think this moves beyond just the outcome, which is then spending or overspending, but it really looks at the root of where all of these things are coming and how we can really practically figure out what is happening inside us. How important have you seen journaling has been in really shifting our habits and figuring out where our pitfalls are when it comes to our ability to create wealth for ourselves? And even the way I just phrased it, I'm just like, it really is impending on our ability to create wealth for ourselves.
It 110% is. Number one, journaling is you writing down, right? But while you're writing down, you're also telling a story. And you are describing a reality that you want, that is probably in the future, as though it's now. Or that's a different form of journaling, but you can also describe your situation as is and then talk about what kind of situation you want to have. It's almost like you're programming your mind, right? Because, so before I go into examples, I love giving like studies. There are always such cool studies out there that really help us explain what's going on. So there was a recent study that was done where they're really testing out the impact of our ability to have like a guided meditation where you envision the future and the kind of life that you want to have. And so some people who've gone through life trauma, maybe you have your hidden shadows include, trauma that you're trying to deal with. And that actually affects your ability to think positively towards your future? Are you able, so they had some refugees, I think from Ethiopia and Colombia, and they took them through these guided meditations to say, well, try and constantly on a daily basis, envision what your future state looks like. Try and really rewrite your story for yourself, as difficult as it is. Because for some people, it truly is difficult. How can I envision a great future when my hidden shadows, there's so much negativity that exists, right? So they decided to take them through it, and they were able to see from a results perspective the impact that it had. There were like positive economic impacts later on.
Oh, wow.
Because you start having positive insights to say, well, I actually do believe in my ability to start saving. So bringing us back to the current topic, I really believe in the concept of being able to like mentally visualize the future that you want. When I think about my own financial journey, I think, okay, what does my life look like at 40? I know, the moment you hit 30, 40 looks like 10 years looks like a long time. But
it is definitely not.
Trust it's definitely not.
Definitely not.
It's definitely not a long time,
Absolutely
right?
not.
So it's almost like saying, well, what kind of lifestyle do I want to have? And make sure that it is at the top of, how you envision it, how you write it down. What story? Where are you living? You have to go and be extremely specific about what you want to achieve. And, in that journaling, the story that you're telling, where are you going? What kind of school do your kids go to? What kind of bank account do you have? You have to really, because it's so interesting that in our present state, we exist our past exists in our memories, but our future exists in our ability to write it down and create it, right? So you can find that balance and actually say, well, how about I write down exactly the, it has been proven that, right? Yeah. Basically, it's been proven. And writing things down and writing your goals down, it's not just about writing it down, but taking it to the next level. Yes, I wrote it down. I put it away somewhere. Try and do something very interesting. What I would encourage you to do, there was a time where I was going through the most. If the most was something, that was me.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to reframe how you think about life. So I wrote down on like a piece of paper the kind of life that I wanted, what I wanted to achieve, but in present tense. I think if you listen to a lot of self-help stuff, you probably heard this before.
I've done it.
Right? You've done it?
I've done it.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Very powerful. And every single day when you wake up, it's literally about reading those 2 or 3 lines. And they will really help reframe your day. It's almost even saying something like, something good is going to happen to me or through me and through me. Or I am going, I'm successful in how I'm able to make good financial decisions. I'm able to make good decisions for myself, my future, and my family. So words like that you're able to say, you reprogram in your mind, because our brain is here. And, we are literally training it on how to exist. So every time you're like, oh, I'm so stressed, let me go shop. You're telling your brain that, okay, when I'm stressed, I need to go shop to be relieved or to be happy. So now the brain is like, happy equals shop, right? So I know it's just a shopping example, but it goes back to many other behaviors that we have that might be both negative and positive as well. So we need to go into this whole training. We can reshape our brain just by how the things we write down, the things we say constantly, and how we visualize the future, constantly future pacing.
I really love that. And in closing, I'm just going to ask one question that is going to, I hope, anchor every woman that is listening to this conversation on some kind of activity that they can start to engage in immediately. And I'm going to ask the same question of everyone. And for you, Lesego, I'm curious also for everyone. This is going to be for everyone. What does wealth mean to you? And what are you most proud of in your journey to achieving wealth? And I mean, if wealth for you is $10 billion and you're at 10 rands, there's something you did to get to that 10 rands. And what would you say for everyone is the reason that they should start to attempt that? And I'm going to ask of everyone. And it can sit in the context of your work, or it can sit in the context of your personal life. Really, what does wealth mean to you? And what are you most proud of having done on your journey to getting to that vision of your own wealth?
The proudest thing that I have done is not outsourcing my financial decisions. Because I think when I started working, I had a financial advisor. You know, they do the funeral covers, and they say this will go to, and then you sort of like relax. So you have to actively
engage,
seek information, interact with your money. It's not somebody else's responsibility. It's not your, up to your friend to advise you. So taking control of my finances is what I'm most proud of. And when I'm not in control, I have anxiety, I have depression, I don't sleep at night. And that comfort and that sense of peace really is what really matters to me most. And, interesting, I was listening to SAFM one of the days in the week, and they say there's a study that shows that people that save however much sleep better at night.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, and however much, as and I was like, wow, it's so true. When things are not in order, you really are restless. But being in control and having that sense of peace and comfort really is what I strive for.
And what does wealth mean to you?
Well, to me, means that I have made the right decisions and I'm comfortable that my future is secure.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that it doesn't include like a private jet, but it's those things, right? And I think we take for granted when we start to associate the idea of wealth to material, that's when we get strayed, right?
Yeah.
And then we think it has to be about the things that I own or the things that people see or what people perceive of me. But I really love that idea of that feeling of security, knowing that you're making the decisions today that are going to offer you security in the future. Really, really beautiful. And what does it look like for you, Charmaine?
Finding myself in a place. And what I always preach is write a letter to your future self so that when you get there, you can look back and you say to yourself, I made it. But it starts with taking the steps today to get to that vision that you're promising your future self to achieve. So that's me.
I think you are definitely a purpose-driven girly. You definitely sit in the space where it's so important to really understand the reason that you're moving forward. It's understanding why you're doing the things that you're doing. And I mean, even the idea of writing the letter is going into that place of why does this journey need to look the way that it needs to look? I really love that idea. And I just, sometimes you listen to these conversations and you feel overwhelmed. And I always try to tell people, just start where you are. Even if that letter is like 3 sentences and you stop and you come back again, just start wherever you are and start to create this vision of the life that you want to live. So that's so beautiful. And Melvin, for you, what does wealth mean and what can we do?
Yeah, on my side, wealth, the moment you asked that question, I just thought time. So for me, I'm an explorer type of person. I love experiences. And so I've learned over the years the value of time, especially in our day-to-day lives, especially in the busyness of everything, in the chaos of everything. And now that I know that it's time that I want, how do I then set up and create a plan that can allow me to be able to, open up time and have the free time that I'm looking for. So it literally breaking down your goals, writing it down. I love the concept of writing letters to your future self. There were studies that have really showed that it's so effective, and it's such a brilliant idea to do as well. Just making sure that, whatever I'm creating now, I'm able to have my outcome of having more free time in mind going forward. But also the fact that you kind of get deterred because you think, but this time concept is quite vague. What do I mean by free time? But that's when it comes when you have to now define it for yourself to say, what does free time mean? Being able to spend time with family, being able to travel, but how many times are you going to travel, right? You have to be very, very specific in terms of what you're looking for. And like you're mentioning, it is a bit overwhelming because I haven't thought about that. I know I want time, but what if I haven't thought about that? But it's just spending, like these money dates are so crucial. It just gets you thinking and gets you to start acting. Yeah. So for me, it's time, breaking down the goals, and being lenient on yourself. Life does happen.
Yes.
If you weren't able to save 10,000, but you save 5,000, you are allowed to celebrate your win and yourself, because the year would have passed whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And you're sitting at 5,000, you could have been at zero.
Absolutely.
You could have been a negative.
Absolutely.
Been overwhelmed by people asking you to take out a personal loan for them.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of different factors, but being kind to yourself, number one, setting out specific goals, writing them down, making sure you create your commitment devices and stick to them as much as possible. And just remember that a bad week doesn't make a bad month.
Yeah.
A bad month doesn't make a bad year. A bad year doesn't make a bad life.
Absolutely.
Right? So just remembering that, to always look at your finances from a holistic perspective, to say, oh, this year I was going through the most, how can I do better and grow
Next
from
year?
there? Because it's all about like that 1% growth, like climbing 1% better than the previous year.
Yeah, I really love that. Thank you so much, ladies. This was so insightful. And I really love that we really spoke to a lot of our emotions, our habits, and the things that we can start to be aware of in order to be able to then engage with all the information that is available already and the resources that are available. So thank you so much for sharing a bit of your work and a bit of your hearts. I really enjoyed it. I felt dragged a little bit, but there were so many light bulb moments even for myself around some of the behaviors that I can change. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
This
This was
Thank you
lovely.
for having us. Thank you.
Sure.